All right, so another problem that I want to do is 4.2. I used to assign 4.2, but I stopped because it was confusing too many students, but I do like to do it as an example. So the instructions tell us to write a class called bulb that represents a light bulb that can be turned on and off. Create a driver class called lights whose main method instantiates and turns on some bulb objects. So let's go ahead and plan out what our blueprint class is going to be. So here's what I have so far to help us plan out our bulb class. So over here, I'm going to list out my instance data and all my methods. And here is where I'm going to think about encapsulation, what instance data I'm going to have encapsulated, and what services I'm going to have to modify that instance data. And over here, I went ahead and drew out a light bulb and a light switch to help me think about how we actually interact with the light bulb and a light switch. So when we read the instructions, it tells us that we need to turn this bulb on or off. So typically when we do something like this, we interact with the light switch, and the light switch will turn this bulb on or off. So really, I only have one instance data. That instance data would be whether this light is on or off. So the name for that, I would say, is a state. Right, so a state would be whether the bulb is either on or off. Now we do have a primitive data type called Boolean, so we can basically represent the on or off with true or false. So one way of designing this bulb class is to use the instance data state. Then my getter and setter would follow the typical convention and be named get state and set state. But I feel like the way I designed this bulb class so far kind of doesn't feel organic. When I turn on a light bulb, I interact with the switch to turn it on or off. Now, in some cases, whenever I have instance data that's Boolean, the accepted practice is to give that Boolean an identifier name that asks a question. So instead of using state, I'm going to use the variable name isOn. So now I have instance data and I decided to name it isOn. And isOn is a Boolean that's either going to be true or false. So if it's on, it's going to be true. If it's off, it's going to be false. So the name of my getter we would typically think would be get isOn. But in such cases, whenever I use a question for my instance data name, I can also use that same question for my getter. So I'm going to name my getter isOn. Now the difference between these two is that my instance data is a variable and my getter is a method. So my getter is just going to return my variable. So for my setter, instead of using set isOn, I want to go ahead and represent this switch by making two methods for my setter, one called turn on and one called turn off. So my setter is composed of two methods to turn it on or to turn it off. And it's working just like the switch that I have for my light bulb. Now the way encapsulation is going to work for an instantiated object of bulb is I'm going to have three services. And those services are going to be the method isOn, turn off, and turn on. And the last thing I need is the toString method, which I need to override, and it's protecting my instance data, which is isOn. So let's go ahead and design this class. So I created this class to be my blueprint for my bulb class. I have a code comment of where I'm going to put my instance data. I'm not going to have a constructor for this class. I have a code comment for my getter, which is going to be the isOn. And then I have a code comment of where my setters are going to go, which is the turn on and the turn off. And the last thing I want to do is I want to override the toString method. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my instance data. So my instance data is a Boolean data type, and I decided to name it isOn. Now the getter for this is also going to be named isOn. So I'm going to go ahead and create this. It's going to work just like all the other getters, except the name is going to be called isOn. So I'm going to have my modifier, I'm going to have my return type, and then the identifier for the method name. And it's going to have a return statement that is going to return isOn. So here's my getter. Now the thing that is different about it is the name of the method matches the name of the instance data, but this is okay. You can have a method in a variable that share the same name. Now I'm going to make my two setters. These setters are going to have a return type of void, but the turn on is going to set isOn to true, and the turn off is going to set isOn to false. Here are the two methods I have for my setter. I have turn on, which is going to set isOn to true, and turn off, which is going to set isOn to false. So the next thing I want to do is create my toString method. And here's my toString method. I'm using string.format to return a string. I just want to see what my instance data is. So I'm printing out the name of the class, and then the name of the instance data, and then the value of the instance data. I'm using %b because %b is used for Boolean values. So I'm injecting a Boolean value wherever the %b is. Now the next thing I need to do is create a driver class that's going to test all the methods in this blueprint class. I'm going to go ahead and create that. So here's my driver class for my bulb blueprint class. I instantiated two bulb objects. Then I print out those values by passing the object to the system out print line. This is going to invoke the toString method. Then I turn bulb 1 on and bulb 2 off. Then I print out the result using the getter. The getter is called isOn. And then I turn bulb 1 off and bulb 2 on, and I call the getter. I'm going to go ahead and compile and run this program. And here are my results. So when I first instantiated my object, the value of isOn was false for both. And that's because I never set the value to anything, so Java defaulted it to false. Then I turned bulb 1 on, it became true, and I turned bulb 2 off, it stayed false. Then I turned bulb 1 off, it went to false, and I turned bulb 2 on, it went to true. Now it's important to remember that isOn is a public method. This is the actual getter method and not the instance data. if I would try to access the instance data, Java will complain. So I'm going to go ahead and test that. So here's a statement I created to access my instance data. I'm trying to access the instance data through my object reference variable. Now, because I didn't use parentheses on this, Java's going to think that I'm trying to access the instance data, and it's going to give me an error message. I'm going to go ahead and compile, and here's the message that I get. Java's telling me that isOn has private access, and that's because if you look at my blueprint class, my instance data is private. Now, if I wanted to actually access the method, which is public, instead of the instance data, I need to use parentheses.